Well, here we are again. It's been almost a year, and once again we're looking at the doorstep of another government shutdown. This time we're sitting back and wondering whether or not the Republican controlled House and Senate can pull together the votes to put together funding for the border wall that Trump promised from the very moment that he came down the escalator in 2015. And we're not really sure what happens in a government shutdown. I don't think anybody out there is really completely sure as to what the government shutdown means. The mainstream media is telling us, of course, that it's going to be the end of the world if the government shuts down, and everybody who's attached to the government is going to die. But in essence, that's really just major hyperbole, and there's really not that much that's going to go on once the government shuts down. In fact, I would go as far to say that without news coverage, most of us wouldn't even know that it's happening. As our government moves away from budgets and into a series of budgetary bills, omnibus spending packages, and stopgap bills in order to prevent crises such as this government shutdown, this is something that we're going to have to pay attention to and possibly get used to in the near future unless we can rein our federal government in and get them to start acting the way that we want. So let's look at what happens during your typical government shutdown, which usually only lasts a few days. We start by saying that a government shutdown is actually a really inaccurate term. A more accurate way to say it would be a partial government shutdown, but that doesn't really roll off the tongue quite as quickly, nor does it strike fear in the hearts of the mainstream media audiences in which the term government shutdown is meant to strike fear into. When your government shuts down, you actually still have all of your essential services. The Social Security continues to go out, which really strengthens the argument and the idea to make Social Security a privatized company that is contracted through the government but doesn't have any hands in the government at all. That's a topic for another video. The mail continues to go out as scheduled. Not even a government shutdown can stop the Postal Service, which famously does not stop for rain, sleet, snow, or hail as well. The payments for the postal workers seem to stop from everything that I've read, but they always get back pay for all of the hours that they worked while the government is shutting down. Our defensive departments continue to stay funded, and the Army continues to stay on ready, even though some of their more non-essential missions may be put to a pause until the end of the government shutdown. They're always there and ready in order to jump out and go forward and defend our country if our country needs to be defended. And of course, our congresspeople continue to get paid no matter what kind of a shutdown happens, because in any case of any sort of legislative battle over the funding of the government, there are laws in place meant to protect the salaries of all elected officials, both protecting them if one party or the other is out of power and wants to defund them in order to put political pressure on them, but also taking them out of the equation of any sort of government shutdown, leaving all of the consequences to land on the pawns like us. But the non-essential federal services will close during the government shutdown, and that has led a lot of people on the right, when talking about the thought of a government shutdown, to bring up the idea of why we even have non-essential government services in the first place. And that is understandable when you're coming from a series of small government people like myself. But the federal government does maintain and have control over federal lands such as national parks and other federal monuments such as the Washington Monument or the Veterans Memorial Monuments around D.C. And it is up to the discretion of the lawmakers who are in control of the shutdown who decided to order it or otherwise as to what to do with them. When I say that the services that are terminated during a government shutdown are discretionary to the Congress or the executive, I'm brought back to the 2013 government shutdown over the ACA, in which during the shutdown it was ordered to federal employees that they chain up monuments and national parks and not allow the citizens who are near those parks to enter until the shutdown was resolved and the budget was passed for the government. As this government shutdown looms, Newsweek has been kind enough to provide us with a list of the services that the government plans to stop during the government shutdown. They've also provided us with information to show that a series of 5 bills has allowed lawmakers to keep the majority of the government open, and that list is above. But let's take a look at the list of people that will be laid off during the government shutdown, including people who will go without pay, so says the article. NASA, most of the EPA, National Parks and Monuments, most of the National Transportation Safety Board, and the Department of Agriculture, along with the FDA. It is reported that all of these departments will go without pay during a government shutdown, but history has shown us that no matter what, all of these federal employees will get back pay, so we will have to see what goes on with this. Historically, the blame for government shutdowns lands on the person or committee in Congress who will not cave to the ideas of the executive who is ordering the shutdown. And this case would have been much the same, except for the fact that this particular looming government shutdown has had an interesting twist. During a meeting with Minority Leader and future Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi and continuing Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Trump came out and said that we will shut the government down over the funding for his border wall, and he doesn't care if he has to take the credit for the shutdown. And most conservative pundits, like Ben Shapiro, were quick to run out and say that this was career suicide for Trump and he should never be admitting guilt for such a government shutdown. But I tend to disagree with this aspect of what he said and what the pundits are saying back to him. In fact, I think this might have been one of the strongest plays that Trump has made to his base especially, but to the American people in general. If we take a moment and look back at Trump's base, we will see that there are a lot of people that are in the base that claim to be small government and anti-government growth. There are a lot of people in the base who are very libertarian in their views. If they're not libertarian outright, they lean so close to libertarian, they may as well be libertarian as well. And with the concept of Trump going out and taking credit for a government shutdown, I think he's really appealing to a lot of the people that are in his base. Brady Leonard of the No Gimmicks podcast is famous on his show for saying, "Don't threaten me with a good time every time they say that the government is going to shut down." And in fact, I tend to agree with that. There are a lot of people in the conservative punditry, especially on the independent side right now, that are wondering if the government is going to shut down and wondering out loud if we actually have to open it back up after it shuts down, which unfortunately we do. But it really gives credence to the thought of what somebody should say to somebody who is taking credit for the government shutdown. Additionally, if we look at the list that Newsweek provided us of various departments that are scheduled to shut down if the government should shut down, I see a long list of government departments that would more easily cater to the people in which they are meant to cater if they are run at a state level individually among all 50 states. And some of these departments don't apply in certain states as they stand, and therefore could be shut down at certain state levels, except for the fact that they are centered in D.C. I think that if Trump should take credit for the government shutdown, it would strengthen his cause among his base and give a rallying cry for people in his base to try and get more people to join the base and vote for him in 2020. But Election Day 2020 is almost 2 years away at this point, and with half of our country believing that there will be a direct effect on them if the federal government shuts down, it's important to see what the options are on the table in order to open DC back up through the new Congress in 2019 and beyond. During the meeting, and especially in interviews after the meeting, Nancy Pelosi has sworn that no matter what happens, as soon as she has the gavel back in her hands as Speaker of the House, she will be taking every measure she can in order to make sure that the government is back open for business while she is the Speaker of the House. And while I admire her courage and her conviction in order to keep Washington, D.C. open, without conceding at some level to the president's agenda, I don't see Nancy Pelosi as having the votes to keep the government open or at least open it back up. But there is another option on the table that is going through the Senate and the GOP leaders over there. Senate GOP leaders have circulated a bill through their chamber of Congress that has just enough funding to carry us through the holidays and up until the next Congress is sworn in, which would squarely land a government shutdown should it happen again on House Democrat leadership and Nancy Pelosi herself, because we would be having this same discussion again, except we would have a change in hands in the House. Strategically, this plan takes pressure off vulnerable House GOP members, and it puts the ball into the court of Pelosi, forcing her to play ball with both the executive branch and the Senate in order to make sure that the government stays open. In the situation that Senate GOP leaders have drawn out, any government shutdown lands on the odd man out, and in this case the odd man out would be Nancy Pelosi and House Democrats, who would refuse to go forward with budgets that would include any sort of funding for the border wall that we were promised. But everything is up in the air right now, and we don't really know what's going to happen going forward. And it's interesting reporting on news that hasn't even happened yet, in spite of the fact that we all believe in our hearts that it is going to happen, or it's going to get swooped up and saved at the very last minute. As I said in the beginning of this video, until we hold our congresspeople accountable to the taxes that we pay to them and force them to write a budget every year, we will be looking down the barrel of another government shutdown every couple of weeks, every couple of months, or every year. Like it or not, omnibus spending packages and continuing resolutions are not budgets, and they are not accountable to the American taxpayer. And the American taxpayer is who the federal government should be accountable to, no matter what. What do you think about the government shutdown? Do you think it's going to shut down, or do you think that we'll get a resolution at the very last minute? I always welcome thoughtful and positive discussion in the comments section below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at EdsBlog Twitter with a 1 in place of the I. Thanks as always for listening to this show and supporting this channel. And remember, never take the words of bloggers, podcasters, or journalists as gospel. Find all the facts and draw your own conclusions. Take care.